This now, I believe that's happening. Yeah, I think I am recording this. So if we want to clone the repository, right, what we want to do is go to code, go to the repository, so SVA Design Media Spring 2024, click code, then we can click open with GitHub Desktop, and we're going to open up that link. Here we are in GitHub Desktop, and as a reminder, GitHub Desktop is like your interface for synchronizing the files on your computer with GitHub, the website on the internet. And so we want to have this URL pasted in here, and then we want to pick the local path. So this is the place on our computer that we're going to save this folder to. So I'm going to go choose a folder, and I'm going to save it to my desktop, okay? And I'm going to hit select. And you'll see that it's going to create this folder here on my desktop. And so I'm going to hit clone. And as we clone it, it's going to download all the things from the internet. And it's going to take a minute because there's a lot of files. Another way you can also, if you don't want to clone the repository, cloning the repository is the best way to stay up to date with all the changes that we're making to it. But if you just want to get all the files one time, you can also just click code and then download zip, and it'll download them all as a zip file. But as we are cloning the repository, what we want to do is just hang out. Wait for the internet. Okay, so right then, once we've cloned it, we can open up this folder in the Finder. So I'm going to hit Show in Finder. And this is going to show us the folder of files that has the repository in it. So this particular example is inside Sessions in Class 7. We have this Quest Pass-Through Demo project, and this is just a Godot project, right? So I'm going to open it up, and I'll show you around. Whenever anything opens for the first time, it takes a minute to load. That's fine. Okay, so here's the scene. You can see that it's a lot of things that we recognize and a couple things that we don't recognize. So for starters, the level itself is just these boxes. They are CSG boxes like we've been using the whole time, right? We want to make sure that we have the collisions turned on. So you can do that by going to using this property right here, use collisions. You just want to make sure that they're turned on for all the things that you want to have collide, right? And the ball that obeys gravity is also pretty straightforward. Oh, hello, come on. It's just a node called a rigid body, and I think we've seen a rigid body before, but I'll show you it in a different scene. A rigid body is just something that, it's a physics object, and it just sort of follows gravity. So if I just have a new scene, and I have I create a rigid body, it'll give us a warning sign, and the rigid body wants to have a collision shape. So I'm going to give it a collision shape, 3D. The collision shape itself wants to have a literal shape. And then I'll also give it a mesh that we can see, a mesh. And I'll give it a sphere mesh. And then that's basically all you need. I'm just going to add a camera to this so we can see it sort of fall down. I'll move the camera backwards. And I'll add a light. And I'll just check that that's in the view. And so now if we run this scene, we'll see that this ball it might not fall down because there might be one step that I'm missing. But I think this should be it. Yeah, that's fine. There it goes, it falls down. So yeah, rigid bodies just kind of obey physics, and if you give them impulses, and that's I don't think it did. It seems fine. Cool. Lying. Yeah, so rigid bodies really just are sort of like that. You can think of them as like physics objects that that are controlled by the physics system itself. And so if you place them up above, they'll fall down. And if you sort of hit them with sort of objects that have collisions on them, collision shapes on them, they'll be sort of affected by them. And so the way it works with the XR scene is, in order to have any XR scene, you need a couple of things. These nodes you don't necessarily need. This is for the hand tracking itself, but what you do need is a node called an XR origin. That's going to anchor the scene in XR space. You need an XR camera, and then you want to have this node is called an XR controller. And so you give it an XR controller, and you assign the controller to track either your left hand or your right hand. So those are for the controllers themselves. And then for the hand tracking is a little bit more complicated, but if you want to do hand tracking, I suggest literally just opening up this example and copying this scene, or copying this this structure, and that's a great way to do it. And I'm also happy to help. If anyone's interested really in doing hand tracking, I can sort of walk you through precisely what you need to do. But you need to have a node called XR hand. I think it's called open hand. Let's see, it's called specifically open XR hand. So you say open XR hand, you tell it which hand it wants to be, so the left or the right hand, and then you want to grab a hand skeleton. And we don't really have the bandwidth to sort of explain skeletons and 3D animation and stuff, but basically, like, when we actually, is anyone familiar with the idea of skeletons in animation? A little bit? Has anybody done 3D animation? When you do 3D animation, you sort of create these different shapes, and then you give them bones, and you create a skeleton.
Like rigging?
Yeah, like rigging, exactly. Yeah. And so you just need like a hand that is rigged up with bones and stuff. And there's an example hand here. You just need, in Godot, the way you can rig it is you sort of make a skeleton node, and then you give it bone nodes. And I just found this hand on the internet, and I worked with it, so I recommend just using one of these. And you can change the actual mesh itself. There's a bunch of different meshes you can use. But if you basically have a correctly laid out hand skeleton, all you need to do is take this open XR node and point it to the hand. So you just say, like, I want it to be pointed to this skeleton hand, and then I want it to be pointed to this skeleton hand. And if you do all that, that's kind of, if you do just those couple simple steps, that's all you need to do. And I'm just realizing also that this is super tiny. So can everybody see that okay? Do you want me to make it bigger? Make it a little bit bigger. In the meantime, are there any questions about that? I know that's like a big sort of like, that's just a lot to kind of dump on you, so I don't expect anybody to like retain that necessarily. But know that like these are this, like if you're interested in going down this route for any of your projects, this is sort of the route you want to take, and you can sort of refer to this recording, and you can like ask me specifically how to set this up.